I never thought a glance could feel like fire until the day she leaned over the counter and accidentally brushed her hand against mine. That single, fleeting touch lingered far longer than it should have, sending a warmth up my arm that I couldn't name yet. Her name was Claire. She moved through the room like she owned the quiet air itself. A soft confidence wrapped around her. A subtle vulnerability that only made her magnetic. Mid-40s, graceful, with eyes that held stories she didn't tell, and a smile that felt like it belonged somewhere I didn't yet understand. I'm Sam, 24, observant, careful, and far too aware of how my chest tightened whenever she laughed, or when she tilted her head to listen, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. That day, the cafe was nearly empty, the hum of the espresso machine filling the small space with warmth. Sunlight spilled across her hair, catching golden strands I could almost trace with my fingers, though I never dared. We were standing too close for just a conversation about her usual order. She talked and I listened, partly because I genuinely wanted to, but mostly because I didn't want to speak too much. My words always felt clumsy around her. She had a way of drawing attention to the smallest details, noticing how the light fell across a tabletop, or how the steam from the coffee curled just right, and I found myself hanging on her every word. Her hand brushed mine again when she reached for her cup, and this time I didn't pull away. I felt her fingers graze the back of mine. Light, deliberate, electric. She didn't notice, or maybe she did, but she didn't act on it, and that hesitation, that pause, made the moment sharper. I could smell the faint scent of jasmine in her hair, the warmth of her coat brushing against my shoulder. She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her expression made my stomach twist. Not desire exactly. Something older, wiser, tempered with a softness that made me ache in ways I didn't understand. Her eyes lingered on mine longer than socially acceptable, and I could feel the weight of unspoken questions hovering between us. I tried to focus on the small things, the way her lips moved as she talked, the nervous tap of her foot under the counter, but it was impossible. My attention kept snapping back to her. I noticed the slight tremor in her fingers as she held her cup, the way she tucked herself just a little closer to the warmth of the counter, as if afraid to be entirely alone yet unwilling to draw too near. She laughed quietly at something I said, and it was the kind of laugh that stays in your ears, clinging, warm and soft. I caught myself staring, caught myself hoping she'd notice. And then the moment shifted. The door to the cafe opened with a soft chime, and a breeze drifted in, carrying with it the scent of rain-soaked pavement. Claire's gaze flicked toward the entrance, and something tightened in my chest. For the first time that day, the electric tension between us, the brush of hands, the lingering glances, the almost touch, was broken by a new presence, a sudden intrusion. She turned back toward me, and in that brief, charged silence, I realized I was already too entangled in her orbit to step away. Her lips curved slightly, almost like a warning, almost like a question I didn't know how to answer. And just like that, the room felt smaller, the air thicker, and the world outside and whoever had walked in irrelevant. I wanted to reach for her, to bridge the space, but I didn't. I only watched, heart hammering, as her eyes met mine again, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. And before either of us could speak, the door opened wider, and the moment shattered. I kept stealing glances at her, even though I promised myself I wouldn't. Claire had this way of appearing in your peripheral vision before you realized she was standing right beside you. Her presence felt deliberate, but it also carried a subtle fragility, like she was holding herself together with threads I could almost see, but never touch. She had told me once, in a quiet moment over lukewarm coffee, that she'd been married too young, that she had loved, lost, and learned to survive alone. Her voice had wavered just a fraction, and I hadn't known whether to reach out or respect the space she claimed for herself. I understood that hesitation. I carried my own skeletons. A relationship that ended badly, a string of near misses with people who didn't see me, or maybe I hadn't let them. That's probably why I was drawn to her, why my attention lingered a little too long. It was taboo, of course. Everyone would see the age gap first. Me, barely out of college, and her, confident mid-40s, a woman who could command a room without raising her voice. That shouldn't matter, not really, but the awareness of how ridiculous it might look, or how wrong it could feel, kept both of us on edge. Still, the way she leaned just a fraction too close, the faint brush of her hand on my shoulder, was impossible to ignore. My chest tightened, my stomach flipped, and I convinced myself it was nothing more than polite proximity. But then she laughed, softly, almost conspiratorially, and I caught the warmth of her breath as she turned to whisper something about the new pastry display. I wanted to breathe in that warmth, wanted to memorize it, but I didn't. I forced a polite smile instead, hoping my heart wasn't making noise. She lingered near me as I rearranged cups behind the counter. I could feel her presence like a current just out of reach. Her fingers brushed my arm, again, and this time I didn't flinch. Her touch was brief, yet the electricity it sparked stretched longer than it should have, filling the air with something neither of us dared name. "I didn't know you liked Earl Grey," she said, her tone teasing. But there was something more, a softness I could feel pressing against the walls I tried to build around myself. I nodded, words failing me, because anything I said would sound ordinary. Not enough. She tilted her head, and I saw her vulnerability, her hesitation, and it mirrored my own. I wanted to tell her I noticed the little things, the way she smoothed her skirt when she was nervous, the way her eyes softened when she thought no one was watching. But I stayed silent, letting the quiet speak for us instead. Then, almost imperceptibly, she rested her hand on mine again, just long enough to make me catch my breath. The cafe seemed smaller, warmer, alive with the tension that had built between us over days of these quiet, stolen moments. For a heartbeat, we simply existed there together, aware of the space between us, aware of how much we wanted to erase it. I looked at her, and she looked back, and we both knew it was no longer just curiosity keeping us near. Something unspoken had formed, fragile and electric. And for a moment, nothing needed to be said. Her hand lingering, my chest tightening. It was enough. The cafe had emptied, leaving only the soft hum of the espresso machine and the occasional clink of dishes. I was wiping down the counter when I noticed Claire hovering near the pastry display, her fingers brushing over the glass as if tracing the edges of some unspoken thought. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I watched her. She didn't notice me at first, or maybe she did and didn't care. That thought alone made my chest tighten. Her hand lingered near mine as I reached for a cup. I froze, the brush of her fingers against mine sending a jolt up my arm. Our eyes met, held. Then she glanced away, cheeks pink, lips parting as if she wanted to say something but didn't. And then the almost ruin of it. The door opened, the bell jingling, and I spun, expecting a customer. It wasn't. It was my friend, Jake, coming in with a grin and a bag of takeout. He waved, oblivious to the taut tension between Claire and me.
"Hey, Sam."
"Didn't expect to see you here," he said, leaning on the counter. Claire stepped back, just slightly, but not enough to break the moment. I swallowed hard, feeling guilty, self-conscious, aware of how delicate the line was between what we could allow and what everyone else would see. Once he left, the air felt different, thicker, charged. I realized just how close we'd been standing. Our bodies almost brushing, the warmth of her shoulder against mine, her scent clinging faintly to the air between us. You missed the last bus, didn't you?" I asked, trying to fill the silence, though neither of us wanted it filled. She nodded, eyes on mine, soft and hesitant. "Yeah, it's fine," she said, but the quiver in her voice betrayed her calm. She leaned just a little closer, and I caught my breath at the nearness. The warmth of her hand lingered near mine on the counter, and I could feel her pulse, subtle, rapid. I wanted to reach for her, wanted to close the small distance between us, but I didn't. Not yet. Fear of what it would mean, what everyone else might think, what she might think, held me back. And yet, neither of us pulled away. We existed in that delicate, suspended moment, heartbeats hammering, words unnecessary. She tilted her head, lips parted slightly, and I imagined, only for a heartbeat, what it would feel like if I leaned in. If I let go. If I let the world and the rules and the fear disappear for just a second. Instead, the tension thickened. I exhaled slowly, letting the moment stretch impossibly long. And then she did something I didn't expect. She leaned just a fraction closer, brushing against my arm, letting the warmth of her body linger. I didn't pull back. Couldn't. Her eyes found mine again, and in that gaze was a silent confession neither of us dared voice. Guilt and longing and desire swirled together, tangled and indistinguishable. And somehow, impossibly, it made the distance between us feel smaller, closer than it had ever been. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We simply stayed there, closer than ever, resisting the pull, yet drawn together in a way that neither could deny. The cafe was empty now, shadows stretching across the worn wooden floor, and the world outside was fading into a quiet drizzle. Claire leaned against the counter, arms crossed, though her shoulders slumped just slightly, a subtle crack in her usual composure. I could feel the tension radiating off her, mirrored by the tightness in my own chest. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured, almost to herself, though I heard it. My hands stilled on the counter, and I couldn't look away. The low timbre of her voice, weighted with something unspoken, pulled me closer than I thought possible. "Why not?" I asked, voice quieter than intended. She shook her head, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and it fell again, curling near her cheek. My fingers itched to tuck it back, to feel the warmth of her skin against my hand. "Because you're too young," she said finally, her gaze dropping, then flicking up to mine with a vulnerability that made my chest tighten unbearably. "You're wrong," I said, voice low, almost trembling. "It doesn't matter. Not to me." She laughed softly, almost bitterly, but her laugh didn't reach her eyes. She leaned just a little closer, the faint scent of jasmine mingling with the warm air, and I could feel the curve of her shoulder pressing lightly against my arm. My pulse jumped. Every fiber of me wanted to close the space between us. "I shouldn't want this," she whispered, voice breaking. She tilted her head slightly, and her eyes locked onto mine. "But I can't stop thinking about it. About you." I swallowed hard, my throat tight, and in a voice I barely recognized as my own, I murmured, "I've been thinking about you too. Every day. Every time I see you, I—" Words failed me, but she understood. I saw it in the flicker of her eyes, the way her lips parted, the subtle tremor in her hands. Without thinking, I reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face, my fingers grazing her temple, lingering at the curve of her jaw. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned just slightly into my hand, eyes half closed, breath catching softly. The warmth of her body pressed subtly against mine, a featherweight touch that felt monumental. For a heartbeat, the world contracted to this tiny space between us. My hand, her face, the impossible closeness we'd been dancing around for weeks. My heart hammered. I wanted to bridge that last fraction of space, to tilt my head, to close the distance with a kiss that would erase all hesitation. She opened her mouth, words unformed, then faltered, swallowed by the intensity of the moment. I leaned closer, our foreheads almost touching, breath mingling in a shared, fragile space. And then the sudden jangle of the cafe door, a sharp intrusion pulling the spell apart. Her eyes snapped open, wide and startled. My hand froze in midair, hovering near her temple. Our faces remained inches apart, the tension crackling like static electricity, suspended between desire and restraint. I wanted to close the distance anyway. I wanted to, and I think in that moment she did too. The cafe was quiet, the drizzle outside casting shadows across the floor. I was res-tacking menus when Claire's voice cut through the soft hum, sharper than usual. "Sam, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. I looked up, heart already hammering. Her eyes held that familiar vulnerability, but now there was urgency beneath it. "What is it?" I asked cautiously, keeping my voice steady, though my hands betrayed me, trembling slightly as they gripped the menus. She hesitated, glancing toward the door as if checking for witnesses, then leaned closer, her breath brushing my ear as she whispered, I didn't tell you everything about why I've been so guarded. I froze. Every nerve in me sharpened. My pulse surged, not just from curiosity, but from the nearness of her, the soft warmth of her shoulder grazing mine as she leaned in. I could feel her heartbeat under her coat, a steady drum that somehow mirrored my own. I was engaged once, she admitted, her voice barely audible. It ended badly, and after that, I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone get close enough to hurt me again. Not really. Her fingers brushed mine, intentionally, I think, and the spark it sent through me made my knees feel weak. I didn't know, I whispered, stepping slightly closer, drawn to her confession, yet wary of the walls we both built. She pulled back just a fraction, as if reminding us both that the world outside wasn't ours to control. And there's more, she continued, voice trembling. I've been watching you, thinking about you, longer than I should have. Maybe I shouldn't even be saying this. Maybe it's wrong. My throat went dry. Every caution I'd tried to keep intact crumbled under the weight of her words. My hands itched to reach for her, to steady her trembling, to close the distance she kept opening and shutting like a fragile door. But fear tangled with desire. The age gap, the past, the possible judgment of others, all of it pressed down on me. She stepped closer again, unintentionally, the warmth of her body brushing mine. My chest tightened at the nearness, the scent of jasmine mingling with rain-soaked air drifting from the doorway. We lingered in that fragile space, inches apart, neither retreating, both aware that crossing it would change everything. Her eyes searched mine, and in that gaze I saw everything she wasn't saying. Longing, hesitation, the pull she tried to resist. I wanted to close the final fraction of distance, but I stayed still, letting her control the pace, letting her decide if we were ready to shatter the fragile tension we'd been holding. And then, almost imperceptibly, she brushed her fingers against my wrist again, a touch so light it could have been accidental. But I knew better. The spark it sent through me burned hotter than any warning. Sam, she whispered, voice catching. I don't know if I can stop myself from... Her words hung in the air, unfinished, dangerous. I exhaled slowly, aware that we were standing on the edge of something irreversible, something we could no longer ignore. I reached a decision before she could finish. I wouldn't step back. I wouldn't hide. I would meet her halfway, letting the tension pull us toward the inevitable. The cafe was hushed now, shadows pooling in corners, the soft drip of rain against the window like a metronome counting down the seconds. I stood frozen, watching Claire, heart hammering so loudly I was sure she could hear it. She was closer than ever, the faint brush of her sleeve against my arm enough to send sparks racing through me. I can't keep doing this, she whispered, voice trembling, fragile yet fierce. Her eyes searched mine, and I saw the conflict there. Desire, fear, and something older, something like regret for not letting herself feel. I reached out slowly, hesitating just long enough to let her pull back if she wanted. She didn't. Instead, her breath hitched as my fingers brushed hers, lightly, almost testing the water. My chest tightened, and I realized there was only one choice left: to step back and let the moment die, or to lean in and risk everything. I don't want to step back, I murmured, voice low, barely above a whisper. Not from you. Not now. Her lips parted slightly, and I could see the catch in her breath. Her hand moved, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face, and my fingers lingered at her jaw, tracing the line with a gentleness that surprised even me. The distance between us had shrunk to mere inches, the warmth of her body radiating into mine, the scent of jasmine and rain wrapping around me. I don't know if this is right, she admitted, the words tumbling out in a rush. But I've never wanted anyone like this before. Not like this. Her confession, raw and unpolished, stripped away every hesitation I had left. Desire, longing, fear. It all collided in a single sharp pulse that made my hands itch to hold her, to close the distance completely. I leaned closer, our foreheads almost touching, feeling the subtle tremble of her breath against my own. My hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing along her skin, careful, reverent, as though touching her could somehow break or heal everything at once. She leaned into the touch, eyes half-lidded, and for the first time, I let myself surrender to the magnetism pulling us together. Then let's stop pretending we can resist, I whispered, voice raw, low, sharing the secret of my pulse with her. Her lips curved into a fragile, tentative smile, and she exhaled sharply, pressing a little closer, just enough for the warmth of her body to fuse with mine. The distance we'd been measuring, testing, fearing, it vanished. For a moment, the world contracted. Just us, just this fragile, messy, breathtaking closeness. Heartbeats tangled, breaths mingled, and neither of us moved away. We didn't need words. Everything we had been holding back, every stolen glance, every brush of skin, every unspoken admission. It was all here, in this fragile, suspended moment. And then she whispered, just loud enough for me, "I've been waiting for this too." I pressed a fingertip to her lips, a silent promise, and we stayed there, inches apart, holding the tension, holding the truth, finally understanding one another fully. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets outside glistening under the soft glow of streetlights. Inside the cafe, the hum of the machines and the lingering scent of coffee made the space feel intimate, as if the world outside no longer existed. Claire sat across from me, hands wrapped around a steaming cup, fingers brushing against mine each time she adjusted her grip. I watched her, memorizing the subtle curves of her smile, the way her eyes softened when she caught me looking. The tension that had haunted us for weeks, the fear, the hesitation, the impossible gap between us, had dissolved into something warmer, more grounded. I was scared, she admitted softly, voice low, almost a whisper meant only for me, of what people would think, of what we could lose. I reached across the table, placing my hand over hers. "I know," I said. "I was too. But none of that matters when it's you." Her smile faltered for the briefest second, but then she leaned forward, resting her forehead lightly against mine. The warmth of her body, the steady pulse beneath my fingertips, made my chest ache in a way that was both new and familiar. We didn't speak for a long moment, letting the quiet hum between us say what words never could. I could feel her breath, soft and rhythmic, and the gentle weight of her hand in mine was grounding, comforting, yet electric all at once. Finally, she leaned closer, and I responded instinctively, wrapping my arms around her. The embrace was long, slow, unhurried. A surrender, a promise, a quiet acknowledgement of everything we'd been holding back. Her head fit perfectly against my shoulder, and I could feel the rise and fall of her chest as our hearts synchronized in the simplest, truest way. "I think I was waiting for this, for us," she murmured, voice muffled against my shirt. "Me too," I said, and I meant it. Every moment of hesitation, every stolen glance, every brush of our hands had led us here. There was no rush, no need to hurry, just the steady, undeniable truth of being together. She tilted her head back slightly, and I kissed her forehead, soft and reverent, a seal on all the fragile, messy weeks we'd shared. Her fingers tightened around mine, and I felt her shift closer, our legs brushing, our bodies naturally finding a comfortable, intimate alignment. For the first time, it felt entirely natural. Her closeness, my desire, the warmth between us, all blending into a quiet, human intimacy that didn't need labels or justification. We had crossed the impossible distance, the gap of years and fear, and found something real. We stayed like that for a long while, hands intertwined, foreheads together, sharing a silence that was full, rich, and infinitely satisfying. Outside, the city moved on, but in that small, quiet cafe, time had slowed just for us. And as I finally let go of the last thread of hesitation, I knew this was only the beginning, of understanding, of closeness, of a story we would write together. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?